200 shares to the foundation, and he talked Hank Parkhurst into doing the same thing. So there's another story behind that, but I'm not going to get into it. It has to do with some resentments from folks who were related to Hank Parkhurst, who later said, "We were robbed." But they did that. In 1940, John D. Rockefeller gave a dinner for those who were members of AA at that time. And it gained national publicity, got a lot of good press. See, John D. Rockefeller didn't give us any money, but he gave us everything else. He gave us his name. He gave us his reputation. He added credibility to Alcoholics Anonymous, for God's sakes, at a time when we didn't have any. And so then in 1941, what's the Post guy's name? Jack Alexander. Jack Alexander is hired by Curtis Bach, who owned the Saturday Evening Post, Curtis Magazines, et cetera, Look Magazine. He says, "Jack," he says, I think there's something to these alcoholics." I said, "You got to get in there and find out what the story is." I said, "I hear they've got connections to Rockefeller. They're making all sorts of money and everything." And Jack Alexander had just did an expose on the longshoremen in the Jersey area. That's the kind of writer he was. So he came and made an appointment to see Bill Wilson about us. And it turns out that he became a great friend of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he wrote an article in March of 1941. And this article was responsible for the increase of 400% of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1941. We started out with 2,000. We wound up with 8. I think that's figured out right. And it was then that, and I'll take up this story Saturday night, but it was then that we started having all sorts of problems just because of numbers. We didn't know how to act. We didn't have traditions. We didn't have anything to hold us together except big shotism and so on and so forth. I'll holler you. I'm the boss. I mean, I'm a member of the Moose. I know how to run a damn meeting. I mean, you could just hear us all having all, and I'm in there. I'm trying to sell insurance and bingo. And hey, did you see this good-looking sick woman that just came in? I need to take care of her. She needs to hear what I got to say. And all that kind of stuff was going on. And I mean, groups were dropping off like flies. Whole groups of people were getting drunk. Not just one or two, but whole groups of people, because we got distracted. See, that's what happened to the Washingtonian back in the 1840s. Within 3 or 4 or 5 years, they had 500,000 members, but within 7 years, they had disappeared from the scene and nobody ever heard of them. And Carl Sandburg said this one time. He said that in the study of any society that has come on the scene and disappeared, they had one thing in common. And that one thing in common that they had is that they had forgotten from whence they came. And that's what we never want to forget. We always want to stay in tune to our history so that we know how precious this thing is. And it's your responsibility and my responsibility to protect it. It's not their responsibility, whoever they are. It's you and I. It's nobody else. We are the ones who are responsible for this thing. And here's the purpose of this meeting, this whole seminar, is so that you will become a hell of a sponsor. I mean, one who knows how this process works, and you are so attached to it you can't wait to give it to somebody else. That's the whole purpose. And Saturday night we'll take up from there and show you some other things that happen. We'll go through a little bit of the not how it works, but why it works. We need to know that. You don't know how fortunate we are. And the responsibility of holding this thing together is not somebody else's, it's yours and mine. And so here's what I want you to do. My request is no pettiness about these seats, okay? You can sit in the back of the room facing that wall back there and it'll be a good seat. Not because I declare it, but I do. It's because if you can hear anything in this room, it's a good seat. Because when we get started with this process in a little while, you're going to be opening books and underlining, and you ain't going to be looking at nobody. You're going to be busy. And so my request is that you pay attention and that you take this to heart. Because I guarantee you this, when you leave Sunday, you will have a sense of gratitude like no other time in your life. So let's do that, okay? So Charlie and Joe will be here in about 15 minutes. We'll get started with the big book, okay?
Our presence, with her presence, I give you Willie B. from Texas.
I will. My name is Willie, and I am an alcoholic. And I know that's the truth because I have a piece of paper here that says, your name is Willie, and you're an alcoholic. I've had an inner ear infection, so my equilibrium is a little bit off. I have not been drinking. I have not been taking pills. My inner ear is going from one side to the other, but y'all be patient. Okay. God, it's good to see everybody. The new faces. How many people, this is my first shot in here, so how many people are new to the seminar, have never been before? Oh, great. All my people that I've seen year after year after year. It's such a joy to see your faces again. Maybe I don't remember your names, but it's so good to see a familiar face. Faces I don't forget. I haven't found it absolutely necessary to have a drink of alcohol since June the 19th, 1957. Yeah, I know. There's always a young'un that turns to his companion and said, my God, she's been sober longer than I've been born. That's okay down there. Don't come up here and say that to me. It sort of hurts my feelings and makes me realize, just how cotton-picking old I'm getting. Now, I hear there's people from Philly and New York and Jersey and all these places that don't spend much time in the South, so I want to clarify this to start with. I talk funny. I was born and raised in Texas, lived all over the world for 20 years, but then went back and I'm rooted in Texas. And I never tried to change the way I talk because us Texans are sort of lazy and we just don't like to change stuff. We just keep going. A lot of my expressions, maybe, you'll have to get an interpreter, but I try not to pretend to be anything but what I am, and that's a Texan just talking funny. I'll say y'all quite a bit, and I'll explain to the Yankees back there. Y'all is just plural for all y'all. So that way I don't miss anybody. This is the 67th Big Book Seminar that the three of us, have held together, with another Joe starting out with us. We started back in 1983 in Pompano Beach, Florida. That was our first one. And we've been going ever since, just like a bunch of little robots. But it's been a beautiful experience for us. It renews my spirit every time I do a seminar. We were doing back-to-back, wall-to-wall in the very beginning. But then we began to narrow down and take it to foreign countries and various things. And it's been quite an experience. And I hope that you'll let me this weekend just share with you and you sharing with me, because your faces do share. That's why I like the podium. I can't sit there because I can't see everybody. But this way, and maybe that's just, my curiosity. I want to see how many people go to sleep back there. But see, being an old ex-school teacher, taught for 37 years, I don't mind if you want to take a nap, just don't make a lot of noise doing it, and I won't mind a bit. Doesn't hurt my feelings. Okay. My job this weekend is to cover this beautiful 12 and 12. That's the job I was given to start with by the great Wesley Parrish that started this whole thing. Where's Wesley? Oh, okay. And he started this, and he called me and he said, Willie, I'd like for you to join these two men and do the 12 and 12. They'll be doing the big book, so you stay out of the big book, and they'll stay out of your 12 and 12. And that's how it started back in '83. And he gave me a job that I have really, really enjoyed. I hope that if you haven't gotten into your 12 and 12, how many people have less than 5 years? Okay. Good for these newcomers. God, I'm glad to see you. And of course, as we'll read here, that big book is what you're in now. But I hope as you go along, you'll combine in with your 12 and 12. It was written 13 years later, after the big book was published. It was written and put together by those that had gotten inquiries from all over the country about, Bill, what did you mean by this? Of course, the big book couldn't contain every single thought in the world that Bill had. They had to sit on him to combine enough so that the book wouldn't be that big to really be a big book. But in 13 years, he realized that maybe they could add to this program by writing a day by day, and he tells it here in the foreword. Let's look together. It's on page 15. Not a lot of light up here. Best we can do is okay. Okay. It's not my eyesight. It's the fact that they don't have no. Bring me a flashlight. It says that Alcoholics Anonymous is a worldwide fellowship of more than 100,000, and of course that was in '84. 100,000 alcoholic men and women who are banded together to solve their common problems and to help fellow sufferers in recovery from that age-old, baffling malady, alcoholism. This book deals with the 12 steps and the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. It presents an explicit view of the principles by which AA members recover and by which their society functions. AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, is just simply a daily type living, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And I didn't know it, but in the beginning, that's what I wanted, to be put back together. Because I couldn't do it. I had tried. But I sort of always felt like a jigsaw puzzle. You went to the store and you bought this beautiful jigsaw puzzle. The picture on the box was nice. You got it home, you flipped it out on the table, and you had all these pieces scattered all over, even a few underneath the table where you had dropped them. But the thing of it is, they still told you about that picture. Keep looking at the picture, Willie. And I was scattered in so many different pieces. Alcohol had taken me. I hear a lot of times, alcohol abused me. It did. And I let it. I invited it to come in and kept inviting and kept inviting. I was young. I was in my 20s, and they just weren't coming in bunches of young people back then, and very few women. And now you men, we'll qualify this to start with. You have two beautiful men up here all weekend. Us gals, you have one. And so I'm going to be directing a lot of my remarks to the women. And don't you men get your nose out of joint, because you usually don't. You've been real cooperative all these years. But every once in a while I'm going to say something to the women, because they're going to be talking to y'all. So, but in that beginning, I felt like I could not put these pieces together when they were telling me about all of the things that I needed to do and all the things, ways I needed to think. And being in groups all over the country, with just mainly men. Once in a while we'd have a stray woman come through. But in the 50s there weren't very many. And the men tried so hard to help me. God, they tried every way they could think of. But I needed me a gal, and I finally got one when we were transferred down to Montgomery, Alabama. So, men, maybe the gals haven't found quite somebody they can latch on to, because we'll talk about that problem later. So y'all be patient. But in another little thing I have, you better be following with your finger, because I skip and stop and start. And, hear those rumblings from the people that have been here. But that's the only way I can do it. So you'll be better off if when I stop talking on what's in the book, keep your finger right there. Because I'm going to pick up, but I might be off in Neverland in between. But when they dazzle me with that, to be usefully whole, not just whole, but I wanted to be useful because I had been so useless for so long to anybody. You know, us drunks have the ability to kill people that don't even drink. And we kill more than just physical. We kill their trust in people. We kill so bad the peace of mind. So I had not only been scattered myself, I'd scattered a whole bunch of other people that tried to love me through it. And we're not real easy to love. Okay, on page 17 at the big, long first paragraph there, go down to say the book Alcoholics Anonymous. The book Alcoholics Anonymous became the basic text of the fellowship, and it still is. This present volume proposes to broaden and deepen the understanding of the 12 steps as first written in the earlier works. So see, it is our second basic text, and it's so much help when you're working with other people. Such a beautiful tool. And when they talk about the principles, broadening the depth of this program, they will. There's none that are written in stone, but I have a set that was given to me way back in the early 60s by a man that had been in with some of the founders. And he told me he had worked out his own little set of principles because he was baffled in the beginning by that 12th step that says to use all these principles in all of our affairs. Joe and Charlie will stress that when they get to it. And there's no list any place sealed up in a safe up in New York. But these are the ones that this beautiful man handed to me that he had worked out on his own so it would help him when he worked with new people. I'm going to pass those on to you this weekend. Each step I do, I'll pass on. Those that John does, I will backtrack and give you those. It's easier than trying to get them all in one thing. So our principle there, as it ends up on the forward on page 18, last paragraph, it's hoped that this volume will afford all who read it a close-up view of the principles and forces which have made Alcoholics Anonymous what it is. And those of us that have been around a couple of days, we know what it is. Our principle in step 1 is honesty. That's on page 21. Honesty and acceptance. And they go together, little by little by little. We can't get honest the minute we come in and start saying, I'm an alcoholic. Many of us, it took us a while to make it. It took me 4 years of sitting in those meetings, mouthing that I was an alcoholic before I actually accepted it. And what they explained to me was that this principle of honesty and acceptance should start being a daily part of our lives. Because honest, we've walked a many a mile away from that principle. A drunk can't continue to drink and be honest. Not only about our drinking, it boils over into other areas it did in mine. It boiled over into my sober areas. I was not a 24 around-the-clock drinker. I was a spree drinker. But see, in between, I couldn't break the habit of lying. And Bill explains that so well in this first step. But I needed to start practicing any part of my life that I want to change. I can't just say, I'm changed. It's a practical thing. And it's practicing in all the little areas, let alone the big areas. That's not where I had been dishonest, not in big areas, but all those little things. I'd, climb a tree to tell a lie rather than stand flat-footed on the ground and tell the truth. Because the truth always never did. I had not dealt with it in so long that it was a part of my being when I opened my mouth. I would start out with a little tiny, but then here came the big one. And we can't operate. I couldn't have held on to my man for as long as I did for the rest of my sobriety. I couldn't have held on to him if I wouldn't have broken that habit of lying to him when I was stone cold sober. He didn't pay attention to, when I lied about my drinking. But what puzzled him was maybe the 3 and 4 months between drunks that I'd go. There'd be lying in between. And that didn't go over so big. Okay. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. I think that tells us something there. We're powerless over alcohol, but all the in-between of our lives was unmanageable. And I realized after being told 15 times that it would become a problem again if I let my sober life, become unmanageable. That I had to keep that straightened up too. Not perfect, just in balance. But I think when we read that first paragraph, think about what it really says. Who cares to admit complete defeat? Practically no one, of course. Every natural instinct cries out against the idea of personal powerlessness. Now, he's talking about human beings there. God, it's hard to admit that we are powerless over anything. As an ordinary human being, you can look down into the little kid's eyes and he'll say, I can do it. He doesn't have the remotest idea how to go about doing it, but I can do it. It's an instinct that we're born with. What if we were different? What if the first obstacle we came up against, okay, that's it. Can't do it. Won't try again. What would become of the human race? Every natural instinct that we have from being little fellows on up is to overcome an obstacle. The best example is in another big book when it talks about Adam and Eve. They were in this paradise. They had everything they could possibly want. Except one thing. Obstacle here. So they mull around with it for a while and then they screw everything up. You reckon somebody was trying to tell us something, whatever you believe in, or just the analogy of the story? You can do anything you want to, but this one thing. That's given us an obstacle, and we wouldn't be complete human beings if we didn't try to overcome those obstacles. So, okay, we get in trouble with alcohol. People tell us, you ought to quit drinking. Okay. You're ruining your life. You're ruining your health. You're hurting all the people around you. Okay. There's the obstacle. What am I going to do with it? Say, okay, that's it. Never again. If you say so. So it was normal, honey, for you to try over and over and over again before you learned any better. That kid learns as he goes along that he better not volunteer to do something if he really doesn't know exactly how to do it. The smart ones do. But just even the normal kids will, find out that they couldn't swim, so they stay out of the water. They went blub, blub, blub the first time they got in the pool. But what I'm trying to say is to realize what this paragraph is telling us. That it's not so out of the ordinary, hon, for you to over and over and over doing the same thing, trying to learn how to drink like a bunch of the people around you could. You sort of get where you sort of watch them, and they're having a good time and everything, and it's not bothering them like it's bothering you. And how you want to be able to do it. So you try over, you use every device in the world, and we can really come up with a lot of them. But it's normal, hon. It's a normal human instinct, not just for drunks. It said it's truly awful to admit that, glass in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive drinking that only an act of providence can remove it from us. Down the bottom paragraph, we know that little good can come to any alcoholic who joins AA unless he has first accepted his devastating weakness and all of its consequences. Not just devastating weaknesses, but all of the consequences. And when we get to looking back, we had a lot of consequences. So that tells me that I'm going to have to watch out in all the areas of my life, not just the drinking. Just because I quit drinking, all you got when you sober up a drunk is an undrunk drunk. That's all you got. So I'm going to have to look out for all of those consequences. Until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. This book has a lot of promises in it, too. Some of them are negative, some of them are positive. But that's one. It says, until he so humbles himself, his sobriety, if any, will be precarious. Of real happiness he will find none at all, proved beyond doubt by an immense experience. This is one of the facts of AA life. The principles that we shall find no enduring strength until we first admit complete defeat in every area. The main taproot from which our whole society has sprung and flowered. When first challenged to admit defeat, most of us revolted. We had approached AA expecting to be taught self-confidence. Then we had been told that so far as alcohol was concerned, self-confidence was no good whatsoever. In fact, it was a total liability. I can do this. If I put my mind to it, I can do this. Our sponsors declared that we were the victims of a mental obsession so subtly powerful that no amount of human willpower could break it. There was, they said, no such thing as the personal conquest of this compulsion by the unaided will. Relentlessly deepening our dilemma, our sponsors pointed out our increasing sensitivity to alcohol. An allergy, they called it. I don't know why I balked at the fact that I was an alcoholic. I kept it in the mental bracket. Dr. Silkworth so very carefully found our answer for us. He explained it in the only way that it's still able to be explained. We got a whole bunch of folks here this weekend. And just to think, we all are alike. We all, have the same chemical makeup. We all have the same thoughts, attitudes, everything. We all have the same backgrounds. No, we come from all kinds of backgrounds, social, economical, everything you can think of. Race, religion, everything. Just in this room. And yet all of us are powerless over alcohol. There had to be a common ordinary, not necessarily deep and psychological, because how are you going to compare people? Poor old psychologists were going crazy. They'd get one of us and they'd figure out an alcoholic is. Did you ever see an alcoholic that is anything? No, the only thing predictable or, about an alcoholic is his unpredictability. Absolutely. When we're drinking. But that's the only comparison. And they're bound to have, to be a logical explanation for all of us getting into the same mental obsession of to keep trying to do something. There wasn't any really logical answer, but we kept looking for it. Why do I do this? Okay. And, of course, then about that time they all came in and said it was because, prenatal or, from the cradle, how Mother and Daddy treated you, all this kind of stuff. That still didn't explain it. Because, see, I came from a little old town in Texas, little old German community. And when I say little old community, I'm talking, we didn't even have our own village idiot. We just all took turns. And I kept looking at that background. Strong German farming community. People that come over here on the boat and settled in this part of Texas because of good farming, good water. Very calm, peaceful. Maybe when everybody was home, we had 300 people. I graduated in a class of 7 from high school. No, honey, I didn't say 70. 7. So this was a small, uncomplicated. I tried to convince the psychologist when they took me to one that the reason I was an alcoholic because I had such a boring childhood. Made sense to me because nothing ever happened there. But I couldn't, and I couldn't make it make sense. But when they said, Willie, read Dr. Silkworth's letter. He tells us we're allergic to alcohol. And I couldn't, I didn't want to relate that in my mind until I was busy popping off about everything else. But I'm allergic to penicillin. I wasn't in the beginning, the first time they ever gave it to me back in the 40s when it was brand new. I wasn't allergic to it. But as I took it throughout the next 4 or 5 years, it got worse and worse. And the last time they gave me penicillin, in the late 40s, I quit breathing. I had just had rashes before. Doctors didn't know too much about that miracle drug that had come in. And see, why I couldn't equate that to diabetes? People aren't, mental incompetence that are diabetes. Why did I keep looking mental? I wasn't, that wasn't the reason I was allergic to penicillin. It was physical. It was an allergy, and that allergy had grown. Many kids are allergic to penicillin the very first time they take it. Many little fellas are diabetics. Other people become diabetics as they get older and older and older. I don't know. I just didn't want it to be that simple. I didn't want my life to be that simple. I wanted it to be deep and real, philosophical and all that kind of jazz. But I promise you, hon, when I took my 4th step and found out I was ordinary, God, it was a relief. Because that is a big relief to realize that I have a chemical allergy to alcohol and penicillin, and that there's nothing of a degenerate within me as far as understanding why I couldn't drink. And it was the only way that why I couldn't explain that to myself sooner, I don't know. But it doesn't bother me anymore, but I make sure that when I get a new gal, honey, let's talk about your physical being. And it helps to know that Dr. Silkworth discovered that for us and tried to help us by explaining it. Chemically, my body doesn't handle it any better than my body handles penicillin. So big deal. Said the tyrant alcohol. See, I told you to keep your finger there. Because it's right after an allergy, they called it. The tyrant alcohol wielded a double-edged sword over us. First, we were smitten by an insane urge that condemned us to go on drinking, and then by an allergy of the body that ensured we would ultimately destroy ourselves in the process. If I took a shot of penicillin now, I'd be pretty stupid, because even though it's been all those years, I'm not going to take that chance. Because I don't like not breathing. And especially now, as I get older and older, I don't like not breathing. Few indeed were those who so assailed have ever won in through single-handed combat. It was a statistical fact that alcoholics almost never recovered on their own resources. That doesn't say, and we're the only ones that can help, but it assures us that our own resources, we're not going to do it. And this has been true apparently ever since man has first crushed grapes. In the pioneering times, none but the most desperate cases could swallow and digest this unpalatable truth. Even those last gaspers often had difficulty in realizing how hopeless they actually were. But a few did, and when these laid hold of the AA principles, not stayed sober long enough, when they laid hold of the AA principles with all the fervor with which the drowning sees life preservers, they almost invariably got well. That's why the first edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous, published when our membership was small, dealt with low-bottom cases only. Many less desperate alcoholics tried AA, but did not succeed because they could not make the admission of hopelessness. I still had my marriage, I still had my man intact, the same one I'd started with, and I don't know how, but he hung in there. But I still had my job. Professionally, I'd been a teacher for all those years, and I still had my job. I'd never lost a job, never been fired. I was one of those that couldn't. I'm not in that bad a shape when I listened to the men that had lost their families, their children, their homes, everything they had. It is with tremendous satisfaction to record that in the following years this changed. Alcoholics who still had their health, their families, their jobs, and even 2 cars in the garage began to recognize their alcoholism. As this trend grew, they were joined by young people who were scarcely more than potential alcoholics. So, honey, if you're hanging on the edge and you think I'm just too young to be in the same shape all these old people are, that's why, don't say very much when I'm sitting in a meeting. Because I want them to identify. If we have 3 that are in their 20s, 18, 19, up and through there, I want them to listen to the younger ones so that they'll have that hope of, okay, if that about my age can do it, I can too. So I keep a low profile. They were spared that last 10 or 15 years of literal hell that the rest of us have gone through. Since step 1 requires an admission that our lives have become unmanageable, how could people such as these take this step? It was obviously necessary to raise the bottom the rest of us had hit to the point where it would hit them. By going back in our drinking history, we could show that years before we realized it was out of control, that our drinking even then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. To the doubters, we could say, perhaps you're not alcoholic. Bill tells us in a letter he wrote in 1942, don't beat him to death. Poor old horse, when you hit him enough, will just leave him alone if he doesn't want to drink from the bucket. But he said, put the bucket down. Tell him everything that water has done for you. And pat him on the nose, put the water down, leave it there, and when he's ready to drink, he will. That's the parallel that he drew. Because you can't make it, especially if anybody here is from Texas or Oklahoma or any place, we got a lot of horses. Let there be light. Oh. You can't make a horse, even if he needs it bad. You can put his head down in the water and he won't move his lips. But put the bucket down, Bill says. Right down beside him. And it contains what he needs, and he'll take it when he needs it. It's all right for us to encourage, but not to try to force, because we don't force so pretty good, because we're so defiant at that point. To the doubters, we could say, perhaps you're not alcoholic at all. Why don't you try some more controlled drinking? And he explained in a letter what he meant by that when somebody asked, what is controlled drinking? Okay, you set up a period of, say, for instance, here's one way, 2 weeks. You're going to come home in the evening and you're going to drink 2 drinks or 2 beers or 2 of anything that you normally drink with alcohol. NyQuil, anything else. But 2 drinks, no more, but no less. For 2 weeks, every afternoon, you're going to come home and take those 2 drinks. Don't not drink and think that, I'm controlling it. I didn't drink tonight. Drink those 2 drinks. And if you can do that for 2 solid weeks and never take that 3rd one, you're not in bad trouble yet. Think about that. How many of us could do it? Or even want to try? Oh, dear God. If I was on a desert island and they left me all by myself with one bottle, I wouldn't touch it. If I wasn't a way to get some more, And I know that so well. Controlled drinking, 2 drinks every afternoon. No more, no less. It'll at least show you how hard you have to really start fighting it, and most of the time you're going to give up. Because I couldn't do it even now after these years of sobriety. So it goes on to say, this attitude brought immediate and practical results. It was then discovered that when one alcoholic has planted in the mind of another the true nature of his malady, that person could never be the same. That's why you leave the bucket of water. That's why you tell them everything you can about yourself. Because the power that rules their life, whatever they come to believe in, he's sticking it in their pocket. He's making that old horse more and more interested in that water. As long as it's sitting there and don't do anything, all right, I'm through with you, blah, 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 blah. You need to know you're alcoholic and blah, blah. Yeah. Tell the old horse. But then I never forgot anything those men in Omaha, Nebraska, Seattle, Washington, Rantoul, Illinois. My husband was an Air Force officer. We were stationed all over the world for 22 years. So I would go from one group of men to the next group, to the next group, to the next group. But all those men didn't try to force me. They tried to teach me through their own experience. But see, I wasn't ready to drink of the bucket. But I didn't forget anything they ever said. I thought nothing they said made any sense. I was sort of like this lion that ran across this bull one time, and lion was hungry, so he killed the bull and ate it. All you old-timers are ready for this story, but it makes the point like no other does, as far as I was concerned. He ate that bull, and he was so satisfied and ready to take a nap, but no, he has to go up on the hill and holler and yell and scream and beller and roar. Well, a hunter came along and shot him. Now, the moral to that story is, if you're full of bull, keep your mouth shut. And one of the men in Seattle, Washington, told me that story. And dadgummit, I couldn't forget it. Because I realized that my mouth was working, and so hard when I would see these people, when I'd go to their dumb meetings, I would work my mouth so much that my ears weren't opened up very well. I couldn't hear what was being said because my mouth was going. So when he told me that story, it made more sense to me than any deep psychological junk that somebody sitting behind the desk could tell me. Okay, over on page 24. The light does help. While this insistent that every alcoholic must hit bottom first, our own personal, we have that deep inside. The answer is that few people will sincerely try to practice AA's program unless they have hit the bottom, unless they've gotten to that moment of surrender. And that doesn't mean a material bottom. It means a soul bottom, where you're so sick of yourself, that's it. You just can't do this anymore. As long as I said to myself, Willie, you need to quit drinking. You're ruining everything, your marriage, everything else. You need to. And when I changed that one word, I want to do it. I want to do it. And that makes a difference. For practicing AA's remaining 11 steps means the adoption of attitudes and actions. Doesn't say anything about, not drinking. But an adoption of attitudes and actions that almost no alcoholic who is still drinking can even dream of taking. We can't take these actions when we're drinking. Who wishes to be rigorously honest and tolerant? Who wants to confess his faults to another and make restitution for harm done? Who cares anything about a higher power, let alone meditation and prayer? Who wants to sacrifice time and energy in trying to carry AA's message to the next sufferer. No, the average alcoholic, self-centered in the extreme, doesn't care for this project unless he has to do these things in order to stay alive himself. Under the lash of alcoholism, we are driven to AA, and there we discover the fatal nature of our situation. Then and only then do we become as open-minded to conviction and as willing to listen as the dying can be. We stand ready to do anything which will lift the merciless obsession from us. You know, like I say, I came to AA to get sober, but thank God I've stayed to be changed. A little at a time. No magic wand was ever waved, but a little bit at a time. And the tools to do that, honey, is right here in both of our books. Just be patient. Give us a try. Give us a try. Run it up the flagpole. If no, don't salute it. Well, you can always go back because the liquor's going to be there. It'll be there, I promise. I have no idea because my watch. I always take extra time when I won't. Huh? What? Oh. Okay. You know, when all this stuff alcoholism started getting so deep and psychological, when all the stuff started where they started examining our minds to find out why we got drunk. So they had all these difficult questions, psychological ones that came in, and we had a fellow down in Texas named Wino Joe. And Wino got so sick of all these questions. He heard them, and, what about your upbringing? Was your daddy cross and mean? And did he spit when he went by you? And whatever, did he chew tobacco? And all these things that were supposed to have molded you into an alcoholic. And Joe got tired of them. He said he went into all these places, and there's questions that they ask you to qualify to be an alcoholic. Got longer and longer, and he had just gone into one that had 6 pages of questions for the old drunk to answer before they were going to let him in to their facility. And Joe got tired of that. He made up his own questions. Joe had been sober a long time, and he was a mean drunk, and he wasn't named Wino for no unknown reason that anybody could figure out. He said when he came in, he had so many wine sores on him, you couldn't drop a quarter on him without hitting one. And he was a great down-to-earth fella, and he made up his own questions. Has the roof of your mouth ever been sunburned? Y'all have beaches around here. I know a lot of you Florida people might be able to identify with that. Going to sleep in the sun. Have you ever been arrested while in jail? Have you ever been run over by your own car while driving it? Have you ever been spiritually inspired by the mildew markings on a shower curtain? See, these make sense to us, don't they? Because of and we didn't have to do those same things, but the insane things. We didn't get drunk in any different ways. A drunk is a drunk is a drunk. We stagger a lot, we fall down a lot, we babble a lot, we, look around a lot to see who we can aggravate. The drunks out there tonight are going to be doing the same thing. Can you think of anything that you've never heard that a drunk does? No, it's not all that out of the ordinary. But the insanity that went along with our obsession, the different ways that we would try to manipulate other people into buying us a drink. I mean, we were movie stars down on our luck, and we had just lost a contract for a new picture, and we could go on and on sitting on that bar stool. All we were trying to do is filter drink. And they know we were lying, but it was amusing to watch us and to listen to us build this story. I'm a doctor that was kicked out of practice, I'm a lawyer. Well, nowadays they wouldn't say that, but they would. If Stu's here, I love you, Stu. And I do. Couldn't resist that jab. But the insane things we would do, like hiding our bottles. You know, it wasn't easy to hide one up in the gutter to get to it, you know, when we had to figure out a way to, when the husband or wife wasn't around, to go up in that gutter and get that bottle. And the insane places, a lot of people won't believe where we hid bottles. That's all right. They wouldn't be looking for them, would they, if they were around nowadays? My husband used to make a list so he could keep up because we kept moving. We were in different houses, and I would find different places. Every house we lived in, had base quarters, had the little different cabinets and different closets and everything. He nearly went insane looking for those bottles. And it was the insanity of it. See, there was only the two of us in wherever we were living. For the first 10 years, there were just the two of us. And he was flying in a terrible lot. Even when he went to Korea, he was gone 18 months. And that's when I started into the second phase of my allergy. It hadn't been bad. We'd done a lot of good drinking together. But there was something different about mine. It was getting different. And being as I didn't have the remotest idea, I kept trying to do it. But even when I was in that house by myself, I started hiding it. Who was going to find it? Insanity. So Joe's questions made good sense. It's amazing when we look back and think, you know, what in the world? How could we go back to that, honey? Think about all the craziness. And think about the insane drinking. And just give this program a try. And as you work with people, just sort of hang it out there as a beautiful carrot, because it is. It's an adventure that you couldn't plan with all the money in the world, the adventure you're going to have in Alcoholics Anonymous. One thing, just think about it, you have friends all over the world. You have people that you can get to a new country, new town, flip open a telephone book, and you find a friend. Doesn't make any difference whether you understand each other's language or not, because I found that to be true all over the world. You know, it's funny how when we think about why we drank, I love this little thing that was in a grapevine. I have no idea, a long time ago, and I put it down, and it just makes sense on the way I was thinking. I drank for happiness and became unhappy. I drank for joy and became miserable. I drank for sociability and became argumentative. I drank for sophistication and became obnoxious.
Your life. I don't mean change it. I'm talking about recreating. I'm talking about reinventing yourself with your beliefs. And the whole purpose of recovery is not about sobriety. It's not about not drinking. Drinking is not the purpose of the exercise here. We saw that on page 45, didn't we? What is our dilemma? Lack of power. You know what the dilemma of the gambler is? Lack of power. You know what the dilemma of the dope addict is? Lack of power. You know what the dilemma of the Al-Anons are? Lack of power. So, and then it says the purpose of this program, purpose of Alcoholics Anonymous, is to bring you from a place that doesn't work to a place that does work using a simple little process that allows your spirit to be awakened. I mean, and sometimes it's just like a hammer clanging. So these facts, these episodes, these things that occurred are just what they are. And they, to a large degree, allowed you or determined how you, if you got a blank canvas, they determined the way you're going to paint it for yourself. And we had beliefs and attitudes which were killing us. I remember many, many times I said this to myself, it was my belief. I don't drink in the morning. How the hell can I have a problem with alcohol? I don't drink in the morning. See, I somehow or another thought that was the determining factor. So I drank a hell of a lot in the afternoon. So we evolve and develop, and somewhere in our life, alcohol is introduced. I don't know about that. I don't know when it was for you. Sometimes it's late, sometimes it's early. I was a teenager. I was in high school. And I'm so thankful that I went to the high school when I did, and I don't have to face the things that these kids have to face today. I mean, there is so much pressure, and we are so pure conscious. I mean, these kids, they got to dress right, they got to buy the most expensive clothes, they got to because they don't feel secure in themselves. Because probably they came from dysfunctional families to begin with, egocentric to the max, me, my. And what can you expect? And my family, my parents did as good as they could with me. But by the time I was 8 or 9 or 10 years old, I had developed my own belief system. I knew what worked and what didn't work. I knew what I wanted. Hell, they are old-fashioned. I don't listen to them. What do they know? So we have to be, once we get here, we cross this line, and life goes downhill from there, doesn't it? Track of life makes a little right-hand turn. Things start happening. Don't get good. You come to Alcoholics Anonymous through some self-imposed crisis, and you get here, and we find out that the problem is what? Allergy. And a lot of folks don't find this out. They just go to meetings, listen to the war stories. Let me tell you how I messed up. Oh, ain't that great? And then they think somehow or another recovery is supposed to come from that. You know what you're doing when you go to a meeting like that, or when you are in a meeting like that? You're giving energy to what? Not the recovery. You're not giving energy to the solution. You're giving energy to the problem. Shame on us. We have got to make a difference there. We've got to start talking the language of recovery in meetings and not this other stuff. We come into Alcoholics Anonymous, we take 1, 2, 3. What is the problem? What is the solution to the problem? I'll talk about that in just a minute. Give me a chance. 12 and 12 right here. I got it right here. It's open. I'm going to get to it. And then we make a decision.
I drank for friendship and made enemies. I drank for sleep and woke up tired. I drank for strength and felt weak. I drank for relaxation and got the shakes. I drank for courage and became afraid. I drank for confidence and became doubtful. I drank to feel heavenly and ended up feeling like hell. All the things I drank for, I've gotten in this program just with the tools that are given to us. I'm going to see you this afternoon on step 3. Right, step 3.
Okay. We have to do this. Mic check. Okay, alcoholic named John. How's everybody? Hey, John. Welcome to Friday afternoon of your life. So used to this night stuff. Now, it's Friday afternoon, and most of you had a nice meal. And I know that your eyes are going to be heavy this afternoon. And you're going to probably feel like nodding off. Thank you very much. And if I see anybody nodding off during this session, I'm calling engineering. It's just too damn warm in here because people are sleeping. My sobriety date's February the 1st, 1975, and I'm eternally grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous, the 12 steps, for allowing me to tap into a power source that is available to every human being that I'm speaking to. That's something that I didn't know. That was the great mystery that unfolded as I did these steps. A process that allowed me to stop listening to my ego and start listening to spiritual principles, which changed and altered and transformed my life into one which is just, you can't even describe it. You wouldn't believe it. And if somebody had told me the first day I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous that my life would turn out the way it did, I'd have said, you are crazy. I'd rather be drunk. Because that seemed too impossible. But it is possible. And that's what I like to talk about in recovery. The possibility that you can live a life unimagined. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to? I mean, we have been to the gates of hell, haven't we? We don't want to return to that. We come into Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you're paying attention to the book, one of the first things you hear from Dr. Silkworth is that unless you're willing to go through this entire psychic change, very little hope of recovery. The thing that kills most alcoholics and doesn't allow them to move forward is the past. It's all that shit they brought with them to AA. Now, every now and then I'll cuss, so just get over it. And the only way I can explain it is it's words we made up anyway. Right? We made them all up. I say shit. Then all of a sudden it's just a word we made up. We could have called it Oodie-ba. We'd have called it anything. But so don't get excited with me about it. Don't come up and talk to me about bad words. I don't try to do that. I do it maybe for emphasis. I don't do it because I want to do it. I do it because I'm not that intelligent sometimes, and I can't think of the word to say, so I say Hootie-ba. All right. And then in the 12 and 12 we see this. I like to use overheads. You know what I'm saying? Takes your focus off of me and makes you look at something else. Then I feel comfortable. I feel like I'm in a dark room. Some of us try to hang on to our old ideas, and the result is nil until we let go absolutely. That's in the big book. And another thing that we need to understand is we will be bombarded with new thinking when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And most of us will be in resistance to that because our ego won't let us give it all up. And so we have to remember, and they put this in the back of the book, for us to remember this. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which is guaranteed to keep man in everlasting ignorance, and that is the principle of contempt prior to investigation. Now, there's not a lot of that in Boca Raton, but down in Pompano, and I'm going to tell you something, we got a lot of it. This stuff will kill you. Now, did you see this non-conference approved literature in your packet? Oh my God. Oh Lord. Well, let's take a look at it. The question is, how do you get from where you are to where you want to be? Is that your purpose here? I don't know. I put that there because I thought that was a profound question. A profound thought about how do I get from where I am to where I want to be? Now, here's what I want to tell you. If you come to Alcoholics Anonymous, a lot of times you will, through fortune or misfortune, get into meetings in where they don't want to talk about recovery. They want to talk about themselves. And when they talk about themselves, and I know this based on my own experience. In the beginning, I didn't know anything about recovery, so what else was I going to talk about? Me and all the trouble I could get into with drinking. And if you're a new person in there, I didn't think about you. I was only thinking about me. You see? So I was just talking about, I used to get drunk and I do this and I lost jobs and I got, it's just so bad. And I just talk about all that and you're sitting there saying, well, I didn't come here for that. I know how to mess up. Right? So if we're talking about recovery, then you've got a shot. I had a great shot because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous on February the 1st, 1975, Wesley Parrish was in the post office the morning after I prayed, a prayer like I'd never prayed before. And I know it was a God thing because I'd been in that post office every morning for the last 100 days that I was drinking, and so had he. But we hadn't been seeing each other except this morning. He saw me and he said, John, how are things going? I said, oh, so. You know, I couldn't tell him I was dying. I couldn't tell him that just last night I prayed to die. And here I am saying, Oh, so. So he said, how would you like to go to meet with me tonight? I said, yes, sir, I sure would. He said, well, I'll pick you up at 7:30. And instead of going to the liquor store, which I usually did, I ran home and told Shirley, I said, Shirley, I just ran into Wesley at the post office. I'm going back to AA tonight. And I've been back ever since. And not because of anything other than the fact that I got tied into somebody who knew the process called recovery, and he knew how to communicate with that book. And he didn't mind telling me that that was my job. When I said I was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and I wanted to live, he took that for what I said. And when I wanted to retreat and said, oh, no, let's don't rush this thing. This is too fast. He didn't listen to me. He said, you want to recover, don't you? I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, you got to do this work. It's, they go hand in hand. But I said, Wesley, I drank for 19 years. Can't I wait a little while? No. Got me in the book the first night. And I had a book. I was lucky when I went in 72. I went to one of those meetings and said, if you're a newcomer, you will leave with a book. It's a foregone conclusion. You win. It's fixed. So I had this book, and every now and then I'd do what I'd call spot reading. I'd spot read it a little bit, and every now and then I'd see something in there and I'd underline it. I'd hand it to my wife, Shirley. I say, Shirley, you need to hear this shit. Do not aggravate my disease. So that was my relationship with the book until I ran into Wesley. So he had me go home that night and read the doctor's opinion. You know, and I had that book all that time, and I had never read the doctor's opinion. He sent me home. I picked up my book. I started looking through it, and I was, where the hell is the doctor's opinion? Chapter 1, Chapter 2. There ain't no doctor's opinion here. And I finally went to the table of contents, and I saw it listed, and then I figured it out. It's in Roman numerals. I was too smart to read Roman numeral pages. I'd never read the doctor's opinion. So that night I did, and I read the doctor's opinion. I began to get a glimpse. I read about allergy of the body and obsession of the mind, and it explained my behavior for the first time. I wondered a lot of times why when I went into the Big Daddy's to have a drink or two so I could go home and explain last night, make up a good story, hear a good lie, maybe a good joke. Then I could go home and say to Shirley, let me explain to you what happened last night. Well, I didn't come home and all that. But I would wind up staying in Big Daddy's getting drunk all over again. And I wondered why that happened so often. But the doctor's opinion began to explain it. I was obligated. I was compelled to have another drink once I took the first drink because I was an alcoholic. Didn't know it. I thought it was a matter of, well, I just, Joe came in while I was having my first drink. He bought me one, so I got to buy him one back. And then we got to finish that 8-ball game we started last night. So it just goes, It wasn't about, I didn't think about having to drink. I said, but of course I got to drink. I'm in the bar, and here these folks are buying me drinks. I got to buy them drinks. So you get drunk. And then you try to rationalize that the next morning. Again. God. You say to yourself, oh my God. Jesus, not another time. Well, of course you're happy you find out you wake up and you're in your own house. You may not be in bed, but you're at least, I recognize this. This is the utility room. I'm here. Home at last, the utility room. But you're happy about all that, and you wonder how you got there. Check out, there's a car in the driveway. Woo-hoo, hallelujah. Wonder if there's any blood on it. You got to think about all that stuff. And so you realize that you made it home once again, and then you said, God, I don't ever want to do that again. And then about noon, you finally get up and go to work, drinking all the time, drinking tomato juice, water, things you've never drank before, but no alcohol. You got this Arab thirst when you get up in the morning. You got to have something to drink. And some folks in the latter stages, they say, well, I may as well have another drink. But I didn't do that. I was drinking wet stuff and just trying to quench that thirst. But it evolved into the other. So along about noon, I get to thinking about last night, and I'd say, well, it wasn't really that bad. It wasn't that bad. See, the obsessions begin to happen now because I've got to justify and rationalize the stupidity of my behavior. It wasn't that bad. I know what happened. I mixed some vodka with that beer. And every time I do that, this goes to hell. So I won't do that again. I'll just do one or the other. And so you get off work, you're on your way home, you got to tell what the hell am I going to tell Shirley now? Oh. So I said, I'm stopping Big Daddy's. Think of a good story. Have one just mellow out a little bit, then go home and do this. And I've just told you what happens. I go in there. I don't know I'm an alcoholic. I have one. The compulsion to have another, or the craving for another sets in. I got to have another, and I make all excuses about having. I get drunk, and I'm back in the utility room. So all of that happens because I had no information. What am I doing with this in my hand if I'm not going to talk about it? How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Now, yes, senior moment and all that. Now you understand why it is that the longer you hang out here, the more you forget.
There's one.
Where?
On the ground.
I know that one. I know what that thing. Now I want to here. Let's get into this thing just a minute. I want to show you. I want to demonstrate the past and how important it is for us to understand that we are who we are when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have to realize that who we are when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous does not work. What's the evidence for it not working? Here we are. And a lot of times, as the paper elicits, I wrote this, and I don't remember everything I wrote, but I know the ideas that I wrote about, is that when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous, we sometimes expect people to know more than they know. And you got to understand, when people come to Alcoholics Anonymous, they may know things, but they don't know jack about sobriety. They're as dumb as a bag of rocks. So sometimes we expect them to know, oh, just don't drink, go to a meeting, and know what to do. And like, that's the answer. Hey, yeah, just don't drink, go to meetings. And the analogy to that is that if you came to me and you wanted to be a pilot, an airline pilot, I'd say to you, just go on down to the airport. Do it for 90 days. 1 hour a day. Do you think that he's going to be able to fly? Hell no. But we say the same thing with people whose lives are on the line. Pilot is just an occupation. It's something to do. It's a job or something or another. But we're talking about people whose lives are on the line. And we expect them to know stuff. They don't know nothing, especially about how to live and how to recover. Doctor's opinion talks about the entire psychic change. The book talks about old ideas. If we're not willing to give up them old ideas, the results is what? Nil. Till you let go, absolutely. So it's telling us that who we were and who we are when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous is not working. So how do we get to who we are? Well, we start somewhere. Let's just say we start today, as we did on page 2 of this thing. We start with now, and we draw a line all the way back to the place we were born. Okay? And I was going to do this on the overhead, but I cannot find. I can't understand how I can't find. I know where it is now. Yeah, I'm organized. Just trust me. Trust me, baby. So anyway, I'll do it. I'll use this old one. Okay, this will demonstrate for us if I can get it on right. Thank you too. Now listen, I'm not apologizing for who I am, but I'm not unexcited about being here. You know what I'm saying? I think about it, and Joe mentioned a moment ago, this is the last time that Charlie, Willie, and I will be together at a seminar, except, at least in Florida, except we got one more to do in California in September. So if you're so inclined, it's in Sacramento. I can give you some information about it if you're so inclined. But to be able to do this, I can't tell you what it's meant to my life. There's no way I can explain that Wesley took a risk with me when he says, John, I want you to be on the program too. I suddenly changed. Well, hell, this program ain't going to work. They'll say, hey, let me see that program again. You're looking pretty good. And so he got me involved in it. Then we got Tomer involved. Tomer made coffee. He made thousands of cups of coffee for the first few years in Palm Air. Best coffee maker there is. And if you got somebody who's been living in a dumpster and wants to get sober, Tomer's the man. He works magic with these guys. So we started in Palm Air, and we had a nice long run there. We then went to Marriott and had a nice run there. And then then after we left Palm Air, we lost our privilege of making coffee. I mean, it was a good deal. And you know, when we have a gathering like this, we drink a lot of coffee. And I notice how I'm trying to slide out of this. We're paying 50 cents a cup today, which is not bad. I paid $1.50 in the restaurant a while ago, but 50 cents a cup. So we have to be self-supporting, but we had to deal with this hotel. They let us bring the supplies and everything, and they only charge us so much to just man the buckets out there. So not a bad deal. So you have to be careful. Why am I getting into that? Is anybody going to be putting on one of these things? Maybe I shouldn't be talking about it. But I was thinking about Tomer and all the good work. Tomer's out of a job now. Yeah, but Tomer says, I'm out of a job, but I got a good seat. So if we draw a line back, we call that the track of life. From this moment, this is the moment, the self-imposed crisis, whatever that episode was that allowed you to come to your first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, or make a call for help, or a plea for somebody to give you some assistance, that you're about to die and you want to get into Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, along this track of life, there are some things that occurred when you were birthed. You know, we were all birthed. I know that because I can see you. Now, but in that scheme of things, you were thrown into a set of circumstances over which you had absolutely no control or no say-so in the matter. But yet, to a large degree, those factors will determine who you become and how you see and interpret life. Your socioeconomic status, your brothers and or sisters, the color of your skin, how much money you have, how much money you don't have, what the religion is, all of those things. You're sort of like a soccer ball, and suddenly you're thrown into the game that's ongoing, and you're expected to pick up stuff. And you do pick up stuff. I guarantee you that if you were born into a home of Southern Baptist folks like I was, the chances of, by the time you're 12 years old, you're a solid Southern Baptist boy and have been baptized.
Amen, brother.
I see there. We got another one here. And my parents never set me down at the dining room table and said, John, listen, do you like Southern Baptist? Or maybe you'd like to try the Methodist. How about the Catholics? Maybe how about the synagogue? Maybe you want to go there. They didn't ask me that. I'm going to be a Southern Baptist boy whether I like it or not. And not only that, if I'm not careful, their political persuasion will influence me too. I'll take on their beliefs. And that's what you and I have done. The beliefs and attitudes that we evolved into come from all of that stuff. Not a good thing, not a bad thing, not a right thing or a wrong thing. It's just the way it is. And so understanding that will let you and allow you to take action which will eliminate stuff that doesn't work. And then you get a chance in Alcoholics Anonymous to recreate